I clicked live. Should actually be live. Yeah, we're live on Facebook.
Thank you.
Okay, we're just gonna wait a few moments for everyone to get logged in.
¿Cómo se llama?
How is everyone doing today?
Well, Alejandra, thank you for doing this.
Yeah, it's very
You're
nice.
welcome. It's my pleasure. Thank you for this amazing opportunity.
We all appreciate it very much, Alejandra. Thank you.
Biomedical.
Thank you, guys.
What's your major again, Alejandra?
Sciences.
All right. So you know something about this COVID-19 pandemic,
Yes.
I think too.
Yes. Actually, this semester I had a microbiology class and I learned a lot about viruses. It was really fascinating.
Bad. They should have hired you at the Ducey administration. Probably should have reached out to you here a month ago.
That would be amazing.
It's okay.
Okay.
Poor thing, you wouldn't want to put her in a situation like that.
Yeah,
She's
I know.
got a whole future ahead of her, Luis. Why designate her? Anyway.
We're live, right? All right.
Okay, so before we get started, I would like to introduce myself. My name is Alejandra Martinez. I am currently a third-year student at Northern Arizona University, majoring in biomedical sciences. Once I graduate, I plan to attend medical school at the University of Arizona to one day hopefully become a forensic anthropologist. Now to start introducing the event. Congressman Raul Grijalva has endorsed candidates Billy Peard and Luis Parra for the Arizona State House. Peard and Parra are running to fill the 2 seats for Arizona's Legislative District 2, which includes Green Valley, Sahuarita, Santa Cruz County, and portions of Tucson. In this virtual Facebook Live event, we will discuss COVID-19 and how the state and federal government can work toward an economic recovery that meets the needs of everyone, not just those at the top. This event will be an hour long. We will begin with a panel discussion with all of the candidates, then segue into questions from the audience. So please, if you're watching live, leave your questions in the comment section. To introduce Congressman Raul Grijalva. Congressman Raul Grijalva has a 3rd-year record of public service in Southern Arizona and began his public career as a community organizer and continues to be an advocate for unrepresentative constituencies in Tucson and Southern Arizona. Raul has served on the Tucson Unified School District Governing Board and on the Pima County Board of Supervisors. In 2002, Raul was elected Congress and today is serving as chairman of the Committee on Natural Resources. Raul leads the fight to protect our public lands, advocate for the policy priorities of Indian country, and ensure that all of us have access to clean air, water, and land. Raul has played a leading role in pushing to the protection of 1 million acres of land in the Grand Canyon from the threat of expanded uranium mining. One second. Thank you for joining us, Congressman Grijalva.
Thank you, Alejandra. Appreciate it, and thank you for taking the time, and much success in your future. I'm very much supporting the 2 gentlemen that we'll be talking with today, Luis Parra and Billy Peard. And I'm doing so not because of disunity with the Democratic Party, On the contrary, it is because we're facing some very, very difficult times right now. And the strength of character of both these individuals that I admire. Uh, I've known Luis for longer than I've known Billy, but both as attorneys and as individuals in the community, they have given the maximum to representing the underrepresented, to advocating for issues and values that I very much am aligned with, and for understanding that our political system is going to work and work well when real people are represented by real representatives. And both these individuals are real. Billy has I came to know Billy because of his work on immigration. He came after his after work and after receiving his law degree, came back to his home here in Tucson uh, to uh, to help in the fight against that horrible law 1070 that convulsed this whole state and really divided the state and continues to represent the issues of immigrants in this community in a very strong way. And as counsel with the ACLU, led those fights. And also, more importantly, too, it's the realm of thing about social justice, economic justice, climate change. Those are the kinds of issues that people care about. And maybe they don't articulate it the way people would want it to be articulated, but they care about it. They care about the future for their families. You know, the poll was just done today that came out that 18% of the people in this country are satisfied with the way and are happy with the way this country is moving forward. And I think that frustration, that anxiety that the American people are facing, I think part of the root cause is that they've seen a political system that's been dominated by money, dominated by special interests, insider decision making, and kind of feeling left out, that their voice doesn't count and that their priorities are not something that are valued by the political establishment. And both these gentlemen have been at the forefront of trying to change that paradigm for the people of Southern Arizona. Let me, Luis, I've known Luis for a while. Uh, my mother is Nogalense, from Nogales, and I've known Luis for a long time. Both as in his official capacity with the city of Nogales, but as a private counsel representing pro bono the interest of a young man that was murdered by a border patrol agent, taking that case to the highest courts and tried to get a fairness for that family and for the people of Santa Cruz County and Southern Arizona. And those of us that have grown up in these borderlands, the places we call home, don't like what it's become. And I think what's happened with COVID-19, what's happened with the cry for social change and social justice that we're seeing every day across this country, that as we talk about rebuilding, and I hope we do that today, and recovering from the pandemic, that we have an opportunity. We have an opportunity to look at our society as a whole and not leave people behind. And I have great belief that both Luis and Billy are going to be the type of citizen legislators that put the interests of the public first. They're not careerists. They didn't start out to be elected officials. They didn't plan to be elected officials. But this is something that is risky, because you risk yourself when you run for office. And I'm very happy that they took the risk. Their values align with our district, and their effort and the interest that they're going to generate in this election, and the necessary debates we have to have about the type of leadership to take us forward are all good. It's not about disunity. It's about representing the public interest. That's what it's about. And I believe these two individuals can and will. And so let me, I think they're both right, not just for the moment, but for the future. So let me turn it back to you, Alejandra, and then the, the two candidates for state rep in District 2 can make the comments they want to make. And thank you.
So now let's get started on the panel discussion. COVID-19 is plunging us into a recession. This is unlikely to be a brief recession, but rather a long-term recession. But we dug out of the 2008-2009 recession. The rich got richer and the poor got poorer. More government services were privatized, businesses owned by people of color and small businesses in general closed while large corporations expanded. Early signs indicated the same is happening this time around as well. At the same time, national crises open up political opportunities. For example, the New Deal and Social Security came out of the Great Depression. How do we harness this moment to bake economic justice into our systems and our laws? What will that look like in 2020, 2021? Congress passed the CARES Act, but there are additional steps that only the state government can take to ensure an equal economic playing field. We need both thinking of both the state and federal level. That's why we need strong state representatives. Now, I would just like to remind everybody that if you guys could please keep your response within 2 to 3 minutes. Now, this question is directly towards everyone. The pandemic has accelerated changes in how we work, such as increasing remote work and automation, which likely benefits high-wage workers. How should the state and federal governments adjust to these changes and make sure the economy has opportunities for all?
Billy, if you'll allow me, I first of all, I just want to take 30 seconds, and I need way much more time than that to thank Congressman Grijalva for his kind comments relating to myself, relating to Mr. Peard. But as I just want to say that you've been a champion on immigration issues, you've been a champion to our environment, and you've been a champion on many social justice issues. And I, as one of your constituents, and as a Nogales brother, I want to thank you very much for all you've done throughout your career. Again, I can't thank you enough, Congressman. With respect to your question, Alejandra, COVID-19 does pose a serious challenge for us here in Southern Arizona. We've had to bear the brunt of decisions that have been made at the state level that, in my opinion, are just not the right decisions. There's been very little transparency with respect to how the state, the Ducey administration has responded to COVID-19, and the testing down in Southern Arizona, especially my hometown of Nogales, was just the tests were not down there fast enough, and at this point we are behind in so many ways, and unfortunately our city is bearing the brunt of these state decisions. And so with that said, I think at this point we really need to wake up, and we need to challenge our citizens, both in Southern Arizona, throughout the state, to become a lot more aware of the challenges that are being posed by COVID-19, to take the precautions that are needed, and to stay positive, because we will rise, and will become the better for it, because as with anything, when suffering comes, people learn, and they wake up, and they make the better decisions down the road. So thank you.
Anyone else would like to comment?
Thank you, Alejandra. I'd also like to thank the congressman.
Good,
as
thank you.
a Tucson, and I was just I grew up in Tucson, and I was leaving Tucson for parts unknown to head off to college in 2002 when the congressman was first elected, but I followed from a distance for many, many years. And one of the things I learned and I think ties into this question, one of the things I learned from the congressman's leadership is that leadership is not just about voting a certain way. It's not just about sending someone to Washington or sending someone to Phoenix to vote yes or to vote no on certain bills. And it's not even just about writing bills a certain way or submitting legislation. It's also about trying to change the public sentiment, trying to inform and educate the public about what's happening in their lives, what's happening in the world, and how their government feeds into that. And so part of an elected leader, I think, is part of that. So I hope to follow in your footsteps, Congressman, in that regard, in terms of if elected, when elected, filling not just the role of a legislator, but of helping to inform and educate, enlighten about the issues of the day. And so this is an issue, right? We're talking about how is the moment of COVID-19 changing how mainly large corporations are, how the workplace is evolving, how they're forcing workers to do more from home, to do more with less. And certainly we're finding that employers are adapting to the moment, that they are finding ways to force their workers or require their workers to do work from home, to do more with less resources. And so we, as state lawmakers, when Luis and I are elected, we need to look at labor policies. Unionization has always been a core of that. Arizona is, at last check, 49th in the nation, right after South Carolina, in terms of the percentage of our private sector workers who are members of unions. There's a lot we can do in terms of ensuring that the long-term effects of the COVID recovery, as corporations find that they can manage more with fewer workers, there's a lot we can do at the state level to ensure that does not adversely affect the average workers. And I'll just close by saying we Arizonans we are from a labor state. This is a state that baked into our state founding documents, our state constitution, is labor rights. It was a mining state from day one. It was a state whose laws and constitution was crafted by workers. And we need to turn back to our roots in that regard. And what better time than now in the rebuilding from COVID-19.
Now for Congressman Grijalva. What does Congress need to do differently compared with its response to the 2008 recession?
I think both Luis and Billy hit on the central point. And we passed the CARES Act, and it went to the Trump administration for implementation. And what have we found out? And then a portion of the money came to Governor Ducey for his discretion. And Luis pointed that out. And what we've learned in the CARES Act, and I think that happened during the Great Recession as well, is that the investment of taxpayer money to help the American people ended up becoming under the control of very few people, non-elected people, and there was no accountability. And the CARES Act, look what $650 billion that the Treasury Secretary says we won't disclose who we gave that money to. That's taxpayer money. What happened to the small businesses in the Main Street in Nogales, in Tucson, and in neighborhoods that are underrepresented and our frontline communities? What happened to them? They didn't receive the support that they should have received because the banks, the four big banks, gave that to their preferential customers, the other business that did business with them. And the same thing with equipment, the same thing with testing, the same thing with many of what the CARE Act was. Those were all good intentions, but they were implemented. And now you try to hold an administration accountable that refuses to do that. Look at Ducey here, and Billy brought that point out. He's kind of dribbling out the money to smaller communities, to impacted communities, to underserved community, dribbling that money out slowly, holding on to most of it. And today, when they asked him at the press conferences, well, we're looking at what we're going to do with it in the future. I anticipate that any budget shortfall, he's going to use the money that should have been used to help the people in southern Arizona, use it to offset whatever losses they have in terms of the budget. You know, saving lives costs money. And the economic consequences are in front of us. And going into the future, but the door has been opened. And I think those people that think that we can just put things back the way they used to be, that's not going to work. Or let's do the status quo and do the same thing we did in 2008, 2009. That's not going to work. I think both the mentality of the American people has changed, and I think the awareness on the part of elected officials that they have to hold accountable. Somebody's got to hold Boozy accountable. You know, he comes and cuts a rib. Oh, look, I brought $1 million from Mariposa. No, you didn't, Juicy. You were supposed to give him that money. And so I think that at the end of the day, the transformational part of not repeating 2008, 2009 is gonna rest on how we hold the elected leadership in this country accountable. And there is a huge role for the federal government and the state government. This is the time where government is a partner with the American people and with communities, where you bring resources and funding to help those communities. And it's going to cost money to stabilize ourselves, and it's going to cost, we need investments in order for have the trained workforce that we're going to need for the future. Isn't it ironic? Isn't it ironic that we walk, the people that we used to walk by all the time, the clerks at the Circle K, the guy that delivers the mail, the bus driver to take our kids to the schools, the cafeteria workers, the people working in the grocery stores that get the food that we need, the farm workers picking the food in Yuma, and the people loading and unloading the fruit and vegetables that are coming from Mexico and Nogales, that all those people are now essential workers. They've always been essential. And so let's remember that and how dependent we are on them, and invest in what their future is going to be like, as opposed to maybe just going back. Because the people that are losing their jobs are the low wage people right now, and the people that are risking the most in this disease are the low wage people.
Okay. Now for Billy and Luis, what can a state legislator do to help the Southern Arizona small businesses community recover from the lockdown? Moreover, in light of the current administration's decision to close the border of Mexican tourists, how might this recovery be affected by a lack of economic activity between the neighboring countries?
Luis, do you want to start?
Why don't we switch? Billy, go ahead and start. And I'll take it from here. And we'll do that in the next one, if it's all right with you.
Okay. Thank you, Luis. And so for those of you watching at home, many of you may already know this. Some of you may not, that Luis and I are both running for the legislature in District 2, which encompasses some of the areas that the question addresses, including Nogales, where millions of dollars of fresh produce historically come through the ports of entry and other goods from Mexico on a daily basis. And not only that, but as the congressman alluded to, in Nogales, there have been generations of clothing stores and merchants in the downtown Nogales, Arizona side, right along the border, where cross-border traffic has fueled these small businesses, family-owned businesses. What they're being hit with right at the moment is a double whammy or a triple whammy. They had, even before Trump took office, a lot of these businesses had suffered from restricted border policies. And then when Trump took office, even more so. And now with COVID, people are, because of both US and Mexican policies, but also because of fear of going out, people are crossing the border even less to do their shopping on the Arizona side. So we're seeing I think my fear, and I think Luis's fear, is that a lot of these businesses are at risk at the moment of not temporary furloughs, but rather permanent closure. And so this is the role of state government to step in. The federal government Congressman Grijalva voted on something called the HEROES Act. The Senate has yet to and I think we anticipate they will probably not act anytime soon, to give money to local governments, to give money to boost other support programs. This is the time when state governments ought to step in. When the federal government is unable or unwilling to provide necessary supports to small businesses, state governments ought to do something within their power. Now, the Arizona government doesn't have the type of resources that clearly the federal government has, but they do have something called, for example, the Rainy Day Fund, which has been at the beginning of this crisis stood at about $1 billion. As the name implies, Rainy Day Fund is designed for moments just like this. And I say, what I've been saying on the virtual campaign trail the past 2 months is, if this is not a rainy day, I don't know what is. This is like a tropical hurricane of a crisis. And so we should be drawing down that rainy day fund. But to date, Governor Ducey has and this Republican-led legislature has saw fit to only spend about 10% of that money, virtually none of it going to small businesses like on Morley Avenue and small businesses throughout Southern Arizona.
Would you like to elaborate on that, Luis Parra?
Sure. I'll try and focus on all of Southern Arizona. Today, Southern Arizona, especially small businesses along the border, I'm sure Douglas, Nogales, San Luis, were really disappointed over the decision to extend until July 21st this decision to not allow tourists from Mexico to travel into the United States and do their essential shopping. A lot of these folks on the Mexican side of the border have taken a hit because they can't cross the border to buy a gallon of milk. There's also and so I understand that there are issues relating to health concerns and such, and they are issues that definitely need to be addressed. However, there is, I think, a way to go about addressing those issues without basically cutting off the lifeblood of many of these border cities. The Trump administration has decided to do this without, I'm sure, consulting border cities. I'm sure the mayor of Nogales, no one reached out to him to ask him probably what his take is on doing this. But what I'm saying is small businesses are really taking a hit. And it's not just the border cities. Cities such as Tucson, they've always had a very strong relationship with the capital of the state of Sonora, and they've always tried to reach out to their shoppers. I mean, the tax dollars in Southern Arizona are going to be way down. Budgets are going to be way down. And I'm sure the Trump administration doesn't really understand how these communities are dependent on our Mexican neighbors. It's just a really difficult thing for border states and communities such as Tucson and Nogales, and I would even say Scottsdale up north. I mean, these our states are going to take a huge hit. I'm surprised that the Ducey administration has really not spoken on this issue of tourists not being able to travel into the United States. And now this has been extended until July 21st. There are also other issues that you brought up, Alejandra, in that particular question, issues related to how the border communities are going to be impacted by other decisions that have come down from the Trump administration and from the Ducey administration relating to these neighborly relations that have to be sustained. Otherwise, we could run into a lot of trouble down the road in trying to rehab that mutual commercial relationship we have with Mexico. And I can't say that enough. That relationship, which I know that Congressman Grijalva over the years has really understood, and he's tried to ameliorate as much as possible, and to have his colleagues in Congress understand that these communities, they're very much uh, related, and they're very much dependent on each other. So we really need to keep that in mind as the state legislator. And I think your question was also about that. How would Mr. Beard and I, how would Billy and I, bring our skill set to the table to be able to help our colleagues in the state legislature understand? Well, we're both immigration attorneys. We both understand exactly how it is that we, the immigrants in our state help our economies, and how they can continue helping our economies, whether it's improving our H-1B program, whether it's having uh, a better relationship between both countries, because things can be done at the state level in order to do that. That's certainly something that I think Billy and I can bring to the table, and the incumbents cannot and have not.
Okay, now this question is towards everyone once again. In recent months, both COVID-19, which disproportionately has affected communities of color, and the protests surrounding George Floyd's death have highlighted racial disparities. What can political leaders in Arizona do to heal our remaining racial inequalities? What do you have to say, Congressman Grijalva?
I, I think that when the two issues have converged and convulsed this country, and certainly Southern Arizona is no exception to that. And what it was not a secret that communities were being left behind, and that I call them the pre-existing conditions in certain neighborhoods and among certain people: poverty, not enough resources in the schools, lack of health care, lack of employment opportunities beyond minimum wage, and lack of investment in those neighborhoods on the business side and both on the people side. And that has been festering forever. And that's systemic, it's discriminatory. And 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 so we will try to deal with them with little patches here and there and there and there. But what I think that happened with this virus is that it opened that door, and if it was a secret, it's not a secret anymore. I never thought it was a secret, but it's not a secret anymore. And so I think the response, and it's becoming evident in the HEROES Act, we did that, where there's a carve out for impacted communities. There's an effort to make sure that minority and small businesses and women-owned businesses get an opportunity to get financial assistance to get them through this, through this economic hard times. But I think it's a comprehensive approach. Everything from environmental justice to making sure that these communities are not dumped on, to the investment in public education, the whole spectrum. And so when you look at, now that you see that, and that's why I said status quo can't work anymore, it's a much more comprehensive response than we've ever had before. Because one virus, the racism and the neglect, has been with us through the history of this country. And it's a pervasive virus, and it's passed on by generation to generation. And we have to deal with that virus too. The pandemic has exposed the weakness in our system of public health to be able to respond, and the weakness in our government in being able to respond to the economic needs of the American people. We have 1 million people out of work in the state. We have that number going up, and now we're having to, Ducey's having to step back and saying to people, okay, I'm going to leave it to the counties and the cities. You decide if you want to reinitiate closing the gap, the spread of the virus. He's kind of too afraid to make his own decision, so he's going to say, Mayor of Tucson, Mayor of Nogales, Board of Supervisors of Santa Cruz and Pima, you make the decision. And I hope they do, and I think they will, to try to keep people healthy. But with those decisions also comes the economic impact. And that's where government, the state, and the feds have to step in and help stabilize those communities, so you're not cutting schools and you're not cutting programs, and you're not cutting essential services that these cities need to run on. Especially communities that have been hit as hard as Nogales, with the drop in sales tax, the lack of trade and commerce coming back and forth. And there are ways to remedy that. We just got to get off this attitude that the border is some ugly criminal place and realize that it's a vibrant place that, if done right, has huge economic potential.
Billy or Luis would like to comment?
Luis?
Yeah, thank you, Billy. So with respect to George Floyd, I would just like to say this: all lives can't matter unless Black lives matter, and that has to be very clear in our state. It has to be very clear in our nation. I'd certainly like to hear those words, or some semblance of those words, come from our governor. I have not heard him. I know that he has expressed his condolences and has expressed other um, words of trying to understand what we're going through right now, but more has to come from him. More has to come from our state legislators, for that matter, because it is a very important issue, not only in our nation, but it's also a very important issue in our state. And I think with respect to diversity in our state, um, the congressman hit the nail on the head. There have been serious inequities, serious inequalities in our state. I think our workers deserve better. Our there are so many things that could be done, I think, at the state level to improve workers' rights, and I intend to work with Billy hand in hand in trying to move forward that legislation that could help the workers in our state, and those that are, as the Congressman mentioned, those that have been affected, those essential workers, those that are in the front lines. We need to do more, and we certainly they certainly deserve more. Healthcare workers, those that are working in the grocery stores, and I don't need to go on, but I can tell you that it is a lot of those same workers, and I'll say it: Mexican Americans, Latinos in our state, and of course African Americans in our state. They have they and we have been working in those essential services, and I will say that with respect to what is happening throughout our country, it is certainly something that that is a wake up call, and that I think will lead us to be more humane, and that will lead us to be more understanding. And as I've said once before when I started this campaign, and I'll say it right now, I think we all have to have common sense, and we have to move towards finding a common ground. And when we do that, we'll all have that common purpose, which is improving our lives.
Just a little quick reminder, my timekeeper, it's a little bit over time.
Sorry.
Yes. Now, Billy, would you like to comment?
Thank you, Alejandra. And I couldn't agree more with Luis. All right, we need our elected leaders, our leaders in our police departments, our leaders all across the corporate and business nonprofit worlds to say out loud and to acknowledge vocally and frequently that Black Lives Matter. I'll give one example. It's not just a phrase. I'll give one example. When the congressman mentioned that I had previously been with the ACLU as a staff attorney here in Southern Arizona. And when I was in that capacity, I worked a lot with local law enforcement agencies, sometimes antagonistic, sometimes working with them to try to reduce their collaboration with ICE, with Border Patrol, and to reduce racial profiling. And time again, without naming names, I would hear from police department leaders, we don't need a policy against racial profiling. Now keep in mind, I'm talking about not long ago. This is 2-3 years ago. after Ferguson, after so many of the other names we've heard so much about before George Floyd. And police leaders would tell me in private conversations, we don't need a written racial profiling policy. We already have one. It's unwritten. It's in our culture. It's in our department, pervasive. We talk about it. And the policy is, we don't do it. It's not right. We don't do it. Well, it's not a policy. That's a slogan. And slogans don't get very far. And that's a tangible example in my mind of being able to say out loud and frequently, Black Lives Matter. If you said it frequently and out loud and meant it, you would put it in writing. You would put a policy in writing, not just a slogan. And so a policy is specific day-to-day activities that happen in every police department nationwide that are prohibited, that you can't stop someone pretextually. You can't stop someone for XYZ reason. You have to have a more substantial reason to stop them. You have to have a more substantial reason to question them. And you put it in writing, and you make it so that officers can be disciplined and fired in egregious circumstances for violations of those policies. Those are policies. And in my view, you don't get there without acknowledging out loud. Now, my friend Luis was a little bit humble in answering his question, because he and I both have worked as attorneys representing folks who've been on the receiving end of over-criminalization. And Luis more than myself. And Luis has seen, and he and I have shared with one another the experiences we've had with our clients, the types of underhanded tactics by law enforcement that are permitted. They're permitted by culture. They're permitted institutionally. And when we talk about this, we're not talking about individual officers. We're not upset about George Floyd because it happened one time. We're upset about George Floyd because it keeps happening. And those are failings of institutions. And as Luis mentioned, it's not just policing, it's also workers' rights. It's also environmental racism. When we have in Arizona, the African-American community is 3% of the Arizona population, but 13% of the prison population, when the indigenous population of Arizona is a few percentage points of the total population, but 5 times the prison population. Those are not examples of individual injustices. Those are examples of institutional injustices. And so we have to acknowledge that, just as we are beginning to acknowledge it, as the congressman said, as a result of COVID-19, the things that are coming to the fore as a result of COVID-19.
Thank you. Now let's see if there are any questions from the audience. So the first question comes from Myla. It is a 2-part question. The Palo nuclear power plant evaporates 27,000 gallons of water every minute of every day to prevent its 3 enormous atomic reactors from melting down in the Arizona desert. The plant generates high-level radioactive waste at a rate higher than any other nuclear point in the U.S. Anyone?
Alejandra, is there a question? I think is there a question on
Yes, there it is. What are you doing / do you plan to do to shut down this dangerous nuclear plant? The second part of the question is, can we replace the jobs at the plant with clean, safe, sustainable jobs developing solar and wind power?
You know, the biggest job loss, one of the biggest job losses during this, the economic difficulties and devastation that's occurred as because of the pandemic is a loss of nationwide of about 600,000 jobs in the clean energy industry. Clean energy, solar, thermal, geothermal, wind, etc. An area that was developing. Not only is it cheaper, it's clean, and I think that one of the ways, you know, right now there's going to be a huge battle that I'm foreseeing down the road with regard to the Grand Canyon and the Trump administration wanting to open up the Grand Canyon and jeopardize the Colorado River, the water source for 40 million people in Nevada, Colorado, New Mexico, and Arizona, and parts of Utah, and jeopardize all that. And I think one of the issue about shutting down the Palo Verde is also a necessary step in terms of the water consumption itself, as we continue in this now 15-year drought, in which we are having to put conservation plans together for the state of Arizona and the basin states in the Southwest that are running out of water. You know, that is probably the most precious resource that's not infinite, and that it ends. And so I think moving toward clean energy, moving toward protecting our water supply, even of itself, begins to downgrade the need for places like the Palo Verde nuclear plant and the jobs there. How do they transition out? And I think that's part of the issue, even when you're dealing with climate change and those in energy areas, whether it is coal, oil, gas, that you have communities that are totally dependent on those for their employment. And there has to be in this transition the same kind of investment in terms of moving those workers into good jobs, dealing with clean energy, remediation, reclamation, all the things that need to happen around the damage that we've done to our planet in those areas. But I think that the long term is the preservation of water and the development of clean energy as one of the principal reasons why the Palo Verde nuclear plant needs to begin to shut down.
I'll just briefly say that, you know, the state of Arizona is blessed with photovoltaic rays, and certainly we need to do more at the state level from the standpoint of pushing for more investments to come in for solar farms and the creation of solar energy, of course, throughout our state. More has to be done. If elected, I'm really, that's going to be from the clean energy standpoint, one of the priorities for me. With respect to the comments from Congressman Grijalva on our water shortages, certainly it's one of the problems has been our rivers drying up on account of the pumping of wells that are just running dry. The current water management, active management areas that allow for unlimited pumping has caused some serious problems in some of our rivers, including the San Pedro River. I would say that this is certainly one of the issues that has to be prioritized in the state of Arizona. Droughts are becoming a serious problem. Tucson right now is facing a serious issue right now, wildfire that is in essence also partially caused by buffalo grass that has that's all over the place in that particular area, and it's costing us a lot of saguaros, and it's costing us some serious problems. And, you know, quite frankly, it's jeopardizing residents in that area. I wouldn't want that to happen in Southern Arizona. And so we need to take an active approach to resolving those issues now. Thank you.
Let me see if there's another question.
Alejandra, I would just add briefly, I know we want to move on to a lot of other questions. I would just say that nuclear energy is a thing of the past, and regardless of whether you know, it's because of what we know is the environmental risks, the enormous amount of water that it requires to maintain a nuclear power plant in a place like Arizona, the constant risk of what happened at 3 Mile Island or Chernobyl. Regardless of all that, we know that nuclear power is a thing of the past. If the congressman may correct me on my details of my facts if I'm wrong, but, you know, since 1979 with 3 Mile Island, the U.S. has not completed the construction of any nuclear plants since that time.
You're right.
And so it's already a thing of the past. The most modern nuclear power plants are already older than I am. And so the one and only nuclear power plant in Arizona is going to fade away. And so it's already going to happen. The jobs are already going to have to be transitioned away. And so it's time to let that one be relegated to the dustbin of history. And let's be proactive about retraining workers and proactive about solar energy and other forms of renewable energy. We can do it, but we have to also have the cooperation of the Arizona Corporation Commission, which is the governmental body that oversees energy regulation, which, by the way, has been bought and sold in recent years by Arizona Public Service, the same company that owns this very power plant. So if we're going to tackle long-term renewable energy solutions, we have to ensure that modern-day corruption is not permitted to fester in the Arizona Corporation Commission. And I'm optimistic about us moving beyond that. We have some wonderful candidates this year running who I think will probably win. So thank you.
We have received various questions and comments regarding private detention centers. What can you do in your positions to eliminate for-profit detention centers, especially during this pandemic where the spread of COVID-19 is a major risk? Congressman Grijalva?
Friday, this will be the fourth time that we introduced this piece of legislation line. And it's basically justice not for sale, that's what we call it. And it's basically mandating to the federal government not to do business for-profit private detention facilities, period, and to phase that out. And you have to look at some of the architects of the 1070 law that I mentioned earlier. Some of the architects that advised the governor at the time and advised the legislature came from the private prison industry. There were consultants with them, and they continue to be the stiffest opposition to any, including DACA, any governmental reform, federal reform around the issue of immigration. Why? Because they make a profit off the detention of immigrants in their facilities. And this COVID thing, lo que está pasando en Palma, and what's happening in Eloy, and what's happening across the country in Texas, has just even made it even uglier. And it's a profit maker. If you track the contributions, they all go to the Republican Party. Some Democrats get some, but at a national level, it all goes to Trump for his campaign. This is a sweetheart deal, just like the people that are building the wall. They're all political contributors to Trump, and they all get nice contracts. And these places have no accountability. Homeland Security doesn't hold them accountable. There's no real federal oversight, and they're making profit off misery. And so we're going to introduce that legislation again, and eventually, I think that and more people are catching up with the concept, and especially recently with the spread of COVID in those facilities, that it's time just to shut them down. People that were opposed to my legislation are now signing on as supporters, and I'm happy for that, because I think that is something the federal government should not be involved in, and it's something the state government should be involved in either.
I think at the state level, for Luis and myself, but I don't want to speak for Luis, but Luis and I both running for state level office. 90% of individuals who are detained or incarcerated in the United States are incarcerated because of state law, and they're incarcerated under state prisons. We'd absolutely need reform at the federal level with regard to ICE detention, the facility at La Palma and Eloy. As state legislators, we also need to recognize, when we talk about private prison system, that regardless of who is incarcerating them, there are simply too many people incarcerated. Whether they're incarcerated by public institutions or by privately owned institutions, like we're talking about here, there's simply too many. And so the number one thing we have to do at the state level, in my view, is to reform the penal code, to reform the criminal code, so that prosecutors at the county level, police at the local level, cannot arrest and cannot prosecute for things that are 18th century or 19th century crimes, that are throwbacks, that are nonviolent, that have no relation to public safety. In addition, yes, we need to end the contracts at the state level as well with private institutions. But we do that by reducing the number of people incarcerated in the first place. And once we've accomplished reducing the total population, severing those contracts with private institutions.
Just quickly add with respect to our penal code, with respect to tying the hands of our state court judges, superior court judges, we certainly need to work on that as a state. Meaningful legislation has to be drafted and has to be pushed through. Otherwise, we're going to be in a serious bind in our state, because so much of our tax dollars goes to those state prisons, and we need to have a better system of rehabilitating offenders, no doubt. I'm a member of the American Immigration Lawyers Association, have been for a long time. And I'll just say this much with respect to what's going on at our detention centers, at these private prisons. These private prisons right now are just not doing enough. That's my call out, and I'm doing it because I'm reading all the emails that are going back and forth among my colleagues here in Arizona, but throughout the nation. And my colleagues are understanding how there are immigrants and also people that are dying in these state prisons because they have COVID-19. Just this morning, one of my colleagues sent an email, and it was such a tough email for that immigration attorney whose client died because of COVID-19, and another one whose client is having to deal with COVID-19 and can't do so appropriately, and their family's not there to try and do anything about it. I mean, I understand they have to serve a sentence, but what I'm saying is that we are going through some difficult times right now, and these private prisons have to do more. They just haven't done enough to deal with this pandemic. And so, having said that, I completely agree that we have to phase these private prisons out. They haven't done enough, and but right now the call out is basically let's do something right now, because this pandemic is taking a real tough turn, and these folks are having to have to deal with it.
Thank you guys so much. Now for closing, would Luis and Billy like to say how the community can help out for the campaign?
Thank you, Alejandra, and thank you everyone for joining. I know there's probably many more questions that came through that we were unable to get to, so I want to emphasize that I can speak for both myself and Luis in saying that the two of us are both running accessible campaigns, meaning if we were unable to answer your question this evening, please reach out to us. I believe we're going to post both my website and Luis's website on the chat screen on Facebook. Please reach out to either or both of us. We're always happy to talk in a socially distanced fashion, by phone, by email, by Facebook, and answer your questions privately or even publicly after this video is over. And the websites both of our websites should be posted on the chat box as I speak. In terms of supporting our campaign in more tangible ways, as many of you probably know, the election, our election, Luis and I, the operative election is not in November. It is in August 4th. So the first thing is to know that you need to vote not once, but twice this year. We're asking you to do your double duty this year as a citizen, for those of you who are able to vote, and to vote twice. And not only August 4th, but because we're in a socially distanced era, and even if we weren't, we still are promoting mail voting under any circumstance during any time. And so this year, early voting by mail for the primary election will start July 9th. So those of you who are registered to vote by mail in District 2 or anywhere throughout Arizona will begin to receive your ballots starting July 9th. If you're not registered to vote by mail and would like to be, you may be registered to vote but not registered to receive your ballot by mail. You can go to servicearizona.com, servicearizona.com, which is the same website some of you may be familiar with in changing your information on your car registration or your driver's license information. It's all the same website, servicearizona.com. You can sign up for mail ballots. So voting, and then prior to receiving your ballot, if you'd like to volunteer and help both Luis and I, we have a lot of safe COVID-19 friendly ways to get involved, both from the comfort of your own home or in other socially distanced ways to get out the vote. We have many thousands of voters to reach between now and early voting on July 9th. So please reach out to us. I believe our contact information is being posted on the chat box. And Luis, do you have anything you'd like to add that I've missed?
I'll add, I guess this is our closing. Am I correct, Alejandra? It is. So before we do close, I want to thank Congressman Grijalva, our Southern Arizona champion, on all the issues we discussed today. And I want to also thank my colleague Billy Peard. I think we're running a clean campaign, and we're trying to talk about the issues as much as possible. Proof is in the pudding. I mean, we're putting together this live stream today to talk about some of these issues they're just so important to Southern Arizona right now. You know, I do have a Twitter account. Please follow me on it. It's Parra for AZ. And I'm gonna try and get more information out there by way of Twitter. Yes, we are trying to get the word out in a social distancing manner as much as possible. My message out to Southern Arizona is please, it's time to get woke. Let's wake up and let's get out to vote on August the 4th. But do it by mailing in your early ballot, and then obviously please vote for Congressman Grijalva, and vote for myself. I'm obviously endorsing my colleague Billy Peard. August 4th is a very important date. The primary is where it's at for us, and again, let's stay safe out there. Here's my mask. Wear your masks. I understand there's a lot of mixed messages out there in our state, unfortunately, but those messages should have gotten out there a while back ago. However, let's get the message out now. Let's wear our masks where we're going. Nogales, con ganas, and we'll get through this. Thank you very much.
Thank you. That's good.
Once again, go ahead.
I'd like to add, that we were speaking with the congressman before we went live here this evening about a press release, a press announcement the governor made. Who the governor has given to the cities of Arizona the responsibility of setting their own guidelines in terms of moving forward with regard to COVID-19 and safety measures. So I wanted to also, aside from helping Luis and I with our elections, call your city councilors, call your mayors wherever you may live, call your board of supervisors at the county level, now that the governor, as of today, has given more authority to the local officials. The governor has failed to take leadership himself, but at least he's stepped out of the way and stopped getting in the way of local governments doing what they should do. So now it's all of you watching tonight, it's your role. Step up, call your city councilors, call your mayors, urge them to do what's right, urge them to implement types of distancing measures that we need so that we're not filling our hospital beds like we've been doing the last 2 weeks.
Once again, I would like to thank all of you, and as well for those who are viewing. For those of you who would like to help with the campaigns, the links will be posted below in the comments. And again, just a reminder, stay safe, everyone.
Thank you, Alejandra.
Yes, Alejandra. Thank you.